Visual literacy is the idea that people have a more sophisticated understanding of the images they're looking at. When we talk about literacy or high rates of literacy, we're talking about, in terms of language, we're talking about people who can read and write, or people who can read or write at a higher level of diction. You know, more sophisticated ideas, more sophisticated grammar. I think the same applies to photography. We need to encourage greater visual literacy. So people are asking critical questions, so they understand when they look at an image a little bit more about how that image was constructed and how the journalists behind that image, the choices they were making about how an event should be represented. Fundamentally, the internet and mobiles are a visual environment, and the foundational sort of element of that is the photograph. Photographs are extraordinarily powerful. You know, there's the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But photographs can cross cultures because you don't need to share a written or verbal language. You don't even need to be literate to understand an image. Images have an extraordinary capacity to evoke human emotion. They're extremely powerful. Therefore, they can be extremely loaded in terms of what's being represented. The two main problems in photography today are sort of digital manipulation in post-production and veracity of images that are in reality legitimate representations of an event, but they may or may not be the event that the audience is being told they are. Or something about the caption, another sort of very common way in which images are misleading is not the image itself, but the text accompanying the image. And again, post-production is another huge problem, I think, in image veracity today. One of the big challenges now, as more and more photographers and amateur photographers and even reporters at news organizations, as they use more and more mobiles, as the mobiles become more sophisticated, and most mobiles are not designed for journalists, they're designed for consumers. And consumers want augmented colors. Consumers want features built into the phone that can change the appearance of where lighting's coming from, or in the case of mobile video, change the speed of a video. Several years ago, I was in Spain, and at the time there had been laws that required that Roma children, gypsies, had to go to school, right? And this was new. And there was a Roma community outside of a very wealthy community in northern Spain. So when the Roma kids went to the school where these wealthy Spanish children went to school, the Spanish kids stopped going. Their parents took them out of the school. So this was a big story. So I take what I thought was a really great picture of a little girl alone in a classroom because she was Roma, because all the other students weren't there. She was Roma, but she had blonde hair. So I submitted it to the editor, and he got back to me and said, well, you know, can't you find somebody who looks a little more Roma? Which I thought was sort of fascinating. And I was a little annoyed, and I said, well, what does that mean? And his own stereotypes played, even as an editor, played into what his expectations this picture should look like. Our fundamental compact with our audience is what I am showing you in this picture is the event that actually happened. And that is true of how color's represented, it's true of where the light appears to be coming from. And the argument is very much is like, look, if your audience can't trust you on these small things about how color's represented, lighting direction, then why should they trust you on the very large things, particularly around controversial topics of what you're trying to represent with those photos? I think one of the challenges for photographers now is it's so competitive and there's such pressure to produce extraordinary images, and often your competition is as much commercial outlets as other journalists, and those commercial outlets don't have the same constraints journalists do. So really, to avoid that pressure, to begin to manipulate your images by, it's so easy now just to Photoshop that little unwanted hand out of your image. Don't do it. It's so easy to use HDR or other tools to dramatically enhance color. Don't do those things. So if you are a mobile user in particular, to try and set it in manual as much as you can, or in some cases use apps external to the native apps that allow you to override some of these increasingly powerful features in your phone that are augmenting your imagery. Increasingly in social media, we tend to, and the links will push us in this direction on social sites, towards other like-minded people on particular issues. It is, and I think, essential, but just a plain good idea, if you are a left-leaning person and all your news sources are left-leaning, take some time. Go see what the other side's saying. And that may help you form a fuller, more balanced idea of the concerns behind stories, particularly complicated issues or controversial issues.